So, hey guys, welcome to this video. This is Gaurav Temla this side, and I'm recording this video to just to give you a glimpse that how you can connect Webinar Jam into Zapier. Because most of the time I've seen that people struggle with one thing when using the Webinar Jam or Ever Webinar is that they have only a trigger option. Like if you see over here on my screen, they only have a trigger option and you need to sign in. That means wherever you are using the Webinar Jam ID, you have to use the wherever you are using a Webinar Jam, you need to use the Webinar Jam page for that registration, where they'll be registering and they'll be sending data as a trigger to the other action points in the Zap. However, the problem is that with this particular thing is that you cannot have Webinar Jam in the action point where you can register. You are registering people on your own landing page. You are taking their data on your own landing page or on your own form, and then you are registering them to the Webinar Jam like the way it happens in the Zoom. Like you are having your own landing page or the form, and you are registering them into the Zoom in the next step, in the action step. However, in Webinar Jam, if you use this native app, something if you use its native app, which is the inbuilt app of Zapier, it will not want to allow you to do, because if I go into action over here and if I see over here Webinar Jam, it will show no action available because it doesn't let you add people into the second step. So what is the turnaround of that you want to use your own form or you want to use your own way of registering people into your webinar or into your event, and then you want to register them into the webinar? So I'll show you something which is known as the API system. So over here, if you see on my screen, I'm taking the data of a person into the jot form. On the top I have a jot form where I'm taking the data, and let's suppose somebody fills up the jot form and this data comes in. Let's suppose Neha has filled up the form and she is showed the interest in registering for the webinar. Now once Neha has filled up the jot form and all that, I'm using number formatters because of removing the white spaces in the number and all that. Now moving straight forward to the step number 4, before you even register somebody to the Webinar Jam, we need to fetch the details of that webinar in which we want people to register. So this whole system works in two steps. The first step is get step. So in API we use two steps. First is get means you are fetching some data from the Webinar Jam, that I want this data. Then using that data in the other steps, post step, this is called as post step, where you are sending the data back to the Webinar Jam with the registrant details. So I'll show you in more in detail how it works. So over here you are using this URL. This is the API URL of Webinar Jam, where you are putting this into the API URL. Okay, so before I go over there, I want to show that which application you need to use inside the Zapier for building this up. So inside the Zapier, you need to use webhooks by Zapier, and the action step event will be post. Don't get post. Use post. Don't get confused with get and post. It's post. You need to use post because here you are sending the request. Here you are sending the request, so you need to use post. And once you use post, go to setup action, then you add the URL of Webinar Jam. So this URL, you can find it inside your documentation.webinarjam.com, or you can use the same URL because this URL remains globally the same for calling the API. Then use payload as form. You will use payload as form. It will show multiple things: JSON, XML, raw form. So you need to use payload as form. Don't go into the technicalities of what exactly these things are. Just use form. Then you need to use API key. The API key you will find once you will log in inside your Webinar Jam account. You'll find the API key over there and the webinar ID. And the webinar ID is the ID of the webinar in which you want to register people. So every time you are changing the webinar, you need to change this webinar ID. Your API key will remain static. It will remain same, but your webinar ID will gonna change every time you are changing the webinar. So the webinar ID remains the same. Oh, sorry, it will gonna change as per the webinar you want to fetch. Now moving ahead, now once you have gone ahead and like entered all those details, so we'll just go on and click on retest and review. So we'll see that according to this webinar ID, it has given us the details: webinar ID, webinar hash, this name of the webinar. This is my one of the clients account I'm using, and so I'm showing you from their account. I don't have a Webinar Jam account. So it's showing type single presentation, schedule number. So schedule is date and there is a schedule number also. We need all of these things into the next step. Now presenters, like all those details of a presenter, like name, and all that. So all of these details will come. So now we'll close this up, and now we want to register our people who has given our details on this particular form into this webinar. So how we're gonna go about that? We'll use the same API. We'll use the same API URL which we have used over here to get the details. We'll be using the same API URL. Then we'll be using the same. Over here, we need these parameters to be sent to the webinar jam for registering. So API key will be using the same API key which we have used over here. I think this is the same one, 938. Just a second, let me check. Yeah, it's the same API key. Webinar ID. So you remember we fetched the webinar ID from the last step over here. If you see, this is the webinar ID. So we'll be putting the webinar ID because we want this person to register into that particular webinar. First name of the person, last name of the person, schedule. So in schedule will not be putting the date. If you see over here in schedule, will not be putting the date. Will be putting the schedule number over here, and in email ID. So if I show you the if I show you the documentation also of Webinar Jam, it will give you a clear idea. Okay, so if you see API key, we have entered webinar ID, first name, last name, email, we have entered, schedule, we have entered. So these are all non-mandatory fields. So these are not non-mandatory fields, so we don't need that. Phone country code, phone number, you want to put, you can put, like if I want to put my phone number, I'll just click on plus plus, and I'll just copy this from here. I'll just copy this from here and I'll paste this, and I'll just copy this phone, uh, and I'll paste this phone. And now I have to put the country code. Okay, so what I have to do is like optional string country code. So in this, I have to put the country code. 91 is my country code, and my phone is 987324442. So this way I put in my mobile number. So however, this is I'm putting manually, but you need to fetch the data from here. So you need to have a number formatter over here, where in number formatter, what you need to do is in number formatter, if it's getting the mobile number, so you need to first of all, uh, what you need to do, you need to have a step over here. If you want to put a mobile number, so what you need to do, you need to put sorry, text. Going under text, you need to click on continue. Clicking continue, you need to click on transform, and you need to click on split text. Continue. Now once you continue, uh, sorry, we need to set up the text. So we'll be putting the mobile number over here. So yeah, so I put in the mobile number, separator is space. So I'm giving the space as a separator. So why I'm giving the space as a separator, the reason for that is I want to separate my country code with my mobile number. I want to separate those because we saw in this particular step that it is asking for separate country code and phone. So I have to separate it over here in this step. So what I will do, I will now I have given the space because the separator between the country code and my mobile number is a space. So I'll giving space. And segment index, I want to have all of these values as separate. So I'll click on continue. The moment I click on continue, I'll click on test and review. And oh, my bad, something I've done wrong. Just a second. Yeah, so now I'll go and click on retest and review. Wow, so now it has done. It has separated my country code and my mobile number. I'll click on close. I'll go to my next step, and here what I will do, I will uh, here what I will do, I will this step is replace. So I need to replace this plus. So I want to replace this plus, and yeah, I want to replace this plus, and sorry, yeah, so it has given me the actual this thing. Now what I will do, I will go to my webinar jam and I will enter my country code directly from here. So it has given me the country code. Just give me a second. Yeah, sorry, it has given me the country code output, and it has given me the phone number also as output. So I will put my these two details, and then I'll go to test action, and I will click on retest action. So yeah, so it has given my, I'm already registered in my in the webinar, and it has given me the live room URL. If you see over here, this live room URL is a unique URL which you can send to your clients to register, to directly log in instead of re-registering into the webinar jam again and again. So you can send this live room URL to them via WhatsApp, email, or whatever way you want to, and you can connect your next level, you can connect your next action steps like your email or WhatsApp system going beyond into the system, and you can send it to your client. So this is the way you can have a webinar gem as an action step into your Zapier, rather than using as a native trigger point into your Zapier. So I hope you like this video, and I hope I'm able to resolve your queries regarding the webinar jam. So if you still have any questions, please do post me in the comment section or let me know. I would love to help you out in resolving those questions or queries. Thank you so much. This is Gaurav Demla this side. Take care. Goodbye.